Seattle lived in a constant half-light, as if the sky itself could not decide between day and night. Olivia Hartman walked through the glass doors of Hartman and Wells Design Studio with the kind of presence that turned heads. Her heels clicked sharply across the polished concrete floor, and a dozen assistants tracked her with admiration bordering on reverence. She carried success the way others carried perfume, noticeable, lingering, impossible to ignore. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet erosion that no one in the studio could see. At home, Ethan Mercer brewed coffee in a small, plant-filled kitchen 3 miles away. He preferred slow mornings, handwritten lesson plans, and the gentle routine of teaching literature to teenagers. His life was modest, structured, and anchored in things that lasted. He believed marriage was one of those things. He didn't realize how much that belief would be tested. Olivia's world had changed rapidly in the past 3 years. She had become the studio's rising star, designing penthouses for tech moguls and boutique hotels for investors with limitless budgets. With every promotion, every gala, every glowing feature on architectural blogs, she drifted slightly farther from the woman Ethan once knew, the woman who used to curl up on the couch with him, sharing cheap wine and whispered dreams. Ethan saw the shift long before Olivia admitted it to herself. That morning, he checked his phone again. No message. She had left before dawn for a client meeting, or at least that's what her note implied. He had grown used to waking up alone, to the faint smell of her perfume fading from the hallway, to dinners for one and small talk that felt scripted. He told himself it was temporary. She told herself nothing at all. Across the city, Olivia leaned over a marble counter as her assistant rattled off the day's schedule. She nodded, but her attention flickered toward the small mirror on the wall. Her reflection looked flawless hair, perfectly waved, eyes carefully lined, lips a sharp berry red. She looked powerful, enviable, and yet she felt like someone playing a role. At noon, she met Adrian Cole. The rooftop restaurant was all glass and warm wood, perched high above the city. Adrian stood when she arrived, greeting her with a smile too confident to be casual. He was older, meticulously groomed, a man who knew the value of attention and wielded it like a tool. "Olivia," he said, pulling out her chair. "You look like Seattle's only ray of sunshine today." She laughed too lightly, too easily. The kind of laugh she never used with Ethan. The conversation slid from business to compliments to flirtation in a rhythm that felt dangerously smooth. Adrian made her feel seen in a way that felt intoxicating. Not loved, not cherished, simply seen. It was a sensation she didn't realize she had been starving for. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his lunch grading essays in the quiet corner of the teacher's lounge. His coworkers talked around him. Weekend plans, relationship complaints, office gossip, but he floated outside of their conversations. His mind kept circling back to Olivia, to the way she no longer reached for his hand in the evening, to the way her eyes shifted whenever he asked about work, to the feeling that their home had become a place she merely visited. That night, they barely crossed paths. Olivia returned late, smelling of wine and expensive food. Ethan sat on the couch, a book open but unread. "You're home," he said softly. "Long day," she answered, dropping her bag. "Just exhausted." He wanted to ask why she didn't call. He wanted to ask where she really was. But he feared that if he pulled on the thread, the entire fabric of their marriage might unravel in his hands. So he swallowed the questions. She went to shower. He heard the water run, the faint hum of her voice behind the door. It should have comforted him. Instead, it deepened the hollow feeling inside his chest. Later, she slipped into bed beside him, scrolling through her phone. He turned toward her. "Liv," he said, "are we okay?" She hesitated for barely a second, just long enough for him to feel it. "Of course," she replied, brushing it aside. But he knew. Something was slipping, fragile and irreversible. In the dim light of their bedroom, Ethan stared at the ceiling long after Olivia drifted to sleep. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand, screen lighting up briefly. He didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. The feeling rising inside him told him enough. Distance wasn't created overnight. It was built quietly, layered one small omission at a time. And in Seattle, under the soft patter of midnight rain, that distance grew wide enough for betrayal to take root. The rain pressed against the windows the next morning, soft but persistent, like a reminder the city refused to let anyone forget. Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee cooling untouched in his hands. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt intentional rather than peaceful. Olivia moved through the hallway, already dressed for work, black trousers, a cream silk blouse tucked neatly at the waist, hair pinned up in a polished twist. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. "I'll be home late," she said, reaching for her travel mug. "You were home late yesterday," he replied gently. She paused, her fingers tightening slightly around the cup. "I told you. There's a hotel renovation in final phase. Adrian wants everything ready for the investor preview." Ethan nodded, but something inside him tightened. She said Adrian too easily now. He wanted to trust her, wanted to believe that the woman he married still lived beneath the layers of ambition and exhaustion. But trust, he was learning, felt fragile when the distance grew this wide. Olivia leaned down and kissed his cheek, brief, distracted, almost courteous. "Don't wait up," she murmured, and she was gone. The door closed with a soft thud, leaving Ethan alone with a silence he no longer knew how to break. By mid-afternoon, a faculty meeting dragged longer than necessary, and Ethan found himself sitting in the empty classroom afterward, staring at the rain streaks on the window. Students had left an hour ago. The halls were quiet, yet he didn't feel ready to go home. Going home meant facing a space where Olivia's presence felt more spectral than real. He pulled out his backpack, searching for papers to grade, and that was when he saw it. A sleek, rose gold tablet, unfamiliar among his things. Olivia's. She must have placed it on the dining table, and through habit, exhaustion, or distraction, slipped it into his bag instead of hers. He almost laughed. She lived through her devices. Losing one would ruin her entire day. He considered dropping it off at her office. He considered waiting until evening. But then the tablet lit up. A notification. A name. Adrian Cole. Ethan froze. The breath he exhaled fogged the screen as he lifted the device. He did not mean to open it. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who dug for answers. He wanted honesty to come naturally, not through evidence. But the screen unlocked without a passcode, something Olivia had always insisted wasn't necessary between them. "Trust," she had said. The irony burned. A message preview sat in the corner of the screen. "Had a great time last night. Can't stop thinking about you." Ethan's pulse thudded painfully in his ears. He touched the screen as if it might disappear under his fingers, but the message remained clear, deliberate, intimate. He stared for a long, slow moment, the truth sinking into him like cold water. Another message appeared. "Dinner again tonight? Same place?" His hands trembled. He wanted to look away. He wanted to wake up. He wanted this to be anything but what it was. He tapped the message thread. Dozens of texts filled the screen, some coded, some blatant, none innocent. "You look stunning today. Couldn't keep my eyes off you. I still feel your perfume on my shirt. Wish I could wake up next to you instead of just seeing you leave." Every word was a knife. He scrolled back, searching for a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that made sense. But the truth was merciless. The affair wasn't new. It wasn't an impulsive moment. It was a pattern. A second life she lived while he waited at home, believing in the marriage she was slowly dismantling. A photo popped up in the thread Olivia at the rooftop restaurant, leaning back in her chair, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at Ethan in months. Adrian's hand rested on the table near hers. Too near. Ethan closed his eyes. The classroom felt smaller, the air too thin. The walls seemed to tilt inward. He sat perfectly still, letting the grief settle into his bones. He did not cry. Not yet. The shock held tears at bay. He left the school without telling anyone. The drive home blurred into gray shapes and wet shadows. When he stepped into the apartment, the silence felt different, heavier, bitter, intrusive. He placed the tablet on the dining table, the same table where they used to eat dinner together, where she now left notes instead of conversation. Hours passed. He didn't move. When the door opened at 9:47 p.m., Olivia stepped inside, smelling of rain and white wine. She looked tired but polished, her lipstick slightly worn, her hair loosened from hours of being swept up. She didn't see the tablet at first. "I thought you'd be asleep," she said, shrugging off her coat. "I couldn't sleep," he answered. His voice sounded distant, even to himself. She walked toward the kitchen, then froze when she saw the tablet on the table. Her breath hitched, just slightly, but he caught it. "I think you left this in my bag," Ethan said softly. Olivia's eyes flicked toward him, alarm flickering before she masked it behind composure. "Oh, thank you. I didn't even notice." A lie. He could see it now. He could finally see everything. Ethan rose, his hands resting on the back of the chair. "Olivia," he said, "is there something you want to tell me?" Her throat constricted. He watched her mind race. He watched her weigh the truth against the lie. "No," she said, "nothing." He nodded once. A small, heartbreaking motion. There it was. The moment trust died. "I'm going for a walk," he said quietly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. The hallway light flickered above him as he left. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew one thing with absolute clarity. The man who walked out of that apartment was not the same man who walked in. He didn't see the look on Olivia's face as he disappeared into the stairwell, the first crack of fear, the first shadow of loss, the first echo of consequences she could never undo. And somewhere deep inside, the distance between them finally collapsed into something irreversible. The night swallowed Ethan as he stepped outside, the cold Seattle air biting against his skin. He walked without direction, the rain turning his hair dark and heavy. His shoes soaked through quickly, but he barely felt the chill. Every step echoed with fragments of the messages he had read, each one replaying mercilessly in his mind. "Had a great time last night. Wish I could wake up next to you instead." The city lights blurred through rain and grief. He should have been angry. Anger was clean, sharp, energizing. But what hollowed him out instead was a quieter devastation, a grief so deep it felt like drowning. He wandered until his phone buzzed. Olivia. He didn't answer. Inside the apartment, Olivia stood frozen in the middle of the living room. The tablet lay on the table like evidence waiting for judgment. She touched it once, then pulled her hand away as if it burned her. Her pulse hammered beneath her skin. He knows. Not everything, maybe not yet, but enough. The way he looked at her before leaving. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity. It was the silence before something breaks. She grabbed her phone and called again. No answer. She typed a message. "Ethan, where are you? Please come home so we can talk." Message delivered, not read. She let out a shaky breath. The affair with Adrian had begun as a spark and exhilarating distraction, a compliment, a shared laugh over a glass of wine after a long meeting. But it spiraled into something else, something reckless, something she told herself she was in control of. She hadn't realized how far she had fallen until detachment became easier than facing Ethan. Now the consequences were no longer abstract. Now they had a face. His face. The way he looked at her, like someone who had just lost the future he built his life around. Ethan reached the waterfront without remembering how he got there. The harbor stretched out in front of him, a dark mirror of the sky. Cargo ships moved slowly in the distance, their lights flickering like quiet beacons. He sat on a bench, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He couldn't go back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The rain eased into a mist, settling on his jacket. He watched waves hit the dock, each one crashing with a steady rhythm that made his chest ache. His phone buzzed again, but he didn't look at it. Instead, he replayed the moment he first met Olivia at the campus cafe, when she was an interior design student who laughed at his terrible poem. She had been radiant and real, unguarded, the kind of woman who made him feel like the world was larger than he imagined. He married that Olivia. He wasn't sure she still existed. He closed his eyes and leaned back, letting the rain hit his face until the numbness spread. Hours passed before Olivia finally grabbed her coat and rushed out. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't breathe. She kept imagining him wandering the streets, hurt and confused, maybe worse. The guilt twisted inside her. Not the guilt of betrayal she had learned to silence that months ago. This was guilt of damage. Damage she had caused to someone who only ever loved her honestly. She walked in circles around their neighborhood, checking cafes, bus stops, the small bookstore he frequented. She even went by the school parking lot, empty now except for a few teachers' cars. But there was no sign of Ethan. Her messages remained unread. Midnight crept in, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. She began to tremble not from cold, but from fear. When she returned home, she noticed something else. His jacket was gone. His wallet, too. Not enough to disappear forever, but enough to disappear for a while. She sat on the floor, her back against the bedroom wall, staring at the door. Her hair had come undone, her blouse was damp from the rain, and her mascara had smudged faintly under her eyes. She looked nothing like the polished woman from earlier. She looked human, frighteningly, painfully human, and alone. At dawn, Ethan finally rose from the bench. His body ached from sitting in the cold all night, but his mind felt strangely clear. He walked to a small 24-hour diner and ordered nothing but water. The waitress didn't ask questions. She simply nodded and left him alone. He opened his wallet. Inside was a photo strip, 2 smiling faces pressed together in a photo booth from their honeymoon. He traced Olivia's face with his thumb. She looked so young then, so hopeful, so his. He exhaled slowly, folding the photo back with trembling fingers. He could return home. Pretend they could work through it. Pretend he could compete with ambition, with desire, with the version of herself she liked better around Adrian. But some truths cut too deeply. Something in him shifted a small, decisive click. The sound of a door closing inside his soul. He stood up. He walked out of the diner, and he didn't walk toward home. When Olivia called the police at 7 a.m., her voice cracked. "My husband is missing," she said. "He left last night and didn't come back. Please help me." The officer took down the information calmly, professionally. Missing person reports weren't unusual in a city like Seattle, but Olivia's trembling voice and the raw panic in it added weight. A formal report was filed. Detectives were alerted. Search procedures began, and by the time Olivia hung up the phone, she realized something terrifying. She hadn't just lost track of her husband for one night. She had lost the version of him who still believed in her, and she had no idea how far he would go to protect what little remained of his heart. Ethan was gone, not kidnapped, not harmed, but willingly gone. And the worst part was this: a part of her knew she might never get him back. The morning unfolded with an eerie stillness. Seattle's rain had softened into a cold drizzle that blurred the skyline, turning everything into shades of gray. Olivia sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles whitened. She replayed the moment Ethan walked out, his quiet voice, the way he avoided her eyes, the heaviness in his step. She didn't call Adrian. She didn't think of work. She didn't shower or fix her hair. For the first time in months, she felt the full weight of consequences she had refused to face. At exactly 9:12 a.m., 2 officers knocked on her door. "Mrs. Hartman?" the taller one asked. She nodded, stepping aside to let them in. One officer, Detective Mayer, carried a small tablet and a notepad. The younger officer scanned the apartment subtly, as though looking for signs of struggle. There were none. "Let's start with the basic timeline, Tom," Mayer said. "When did you last see your husband?" "Last night," Olivia whispered. "Around 10. He left the apartment. He didn't say where he was going." "Were you arguing?" She hesitated, her breath snagged. "No," she lied. Mayer tilted his head slightly, registering the tremor in her voice. "Any reason he would leave voluntarily? Stress, work issues, personal matters?" Her throat tightened. She forced the words out. He's been distant. I think he's been unhappy, but he's not the type to disappear." The officer jotted notes while Mayer's gaze lingered on her face, calm, patient, but probing. "Do you have access to his financial accounts, credit cards, bank alerts? We'll file for data checks, but anything you can provide will help." She handed over Ethan's bank login information with shaking hands. She didn't know his passwords until now, but Ethan had written everything down on a slip of paper in the desk drawer, something simple, almost naive. Another reminder of how differently they had lived. As the officers left, Mayer turned back. "We'll contact you once we have updates. In the meantime, stay reachable." Reachable, as if she could go anywhere. By noon, Olivia's phone was buzzing relentlessly, not from the police, but from friends, colleagues, and her sister, Emily. "Where is Ethan? Why did the police come to your place? Do you need help?" She ignored every call. Instead, she stared at Ethan's jacket still hanging near the door. He had taken the older one, the thinner one, the one she always told him wasn't warm enough. What did that mean? Impulsive? Intentional? Did he expect to return? She pressed her forehead against the window, watching people hurry down the street with umbrellas. They all had destinations. They all had purpose. She felt like she was suspended in time. By evening, the first update arrived. Detective Mayer called. "We tracked his debit card," he said. "It was used at a cafe near the waterfront early this morning. After that, no activity." Olivia closed her eyes. "So he's alive?" "Alive and on foot," Mayer replied, "but not using transportation or credit. That usually indicates voluntary absence." The word struck her harder than she expected. Voluntary. He chose to leave. He chose distance. He chose life without her. The officer continued, "We're expanding the search radius. If we find anything, you'll be notified." She thanked him and hung up, though her voice barely held. But the next call wasn't from the police. It was from a stranger. "Mrs. Hartman, my name is Lucas Drayton. I'm a private detective." Her breath caught. I didn't hire a private detective. No, he said evenly. Your sister did. Olivia closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. Emily always interfered when she panicked, always tried to fix what she didn't understand. I'd like to meet, Lucas said. The police will handle their end, but private investigators can dig into details, faster places he could go, people he might trust, patterns, digital trails. The sooner we begin, the better the chance of finding him. She hesitated. Does he want to be found? She whispered. There was a pause before Lucas answered. That's what I'm here to figure out. They met at a small cafe 2 blocks from her apartment. Lucas Drayton was in his early 40s, tall, sharp-featured, with an expression that gave nothing away. He carried a worn leather notebook and a quiet presence that felt disarmingly observant. Olivia sat across from him, fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. Tell me about your marriage, Lucas said. The question pierced her like a blade. She could lie. She could soften it. She could hide the parts that made her ashamed. But Ethan was missing, and she had already done enough damage. So the truth came out in fragments, hesitant, raw, incomplete. We grew apart, she said first. My career changed things. Lucas waited. Then she forced the words she feared most. I was unfaithful. His expression didn't shift. He simply wrote something down. How long? About 3 months. Does your husband know? She swallowed. I think he found out last night. Did he ever talk about leaving, divorce, anything that suggested running? No, she whispered. He's not the type to abandon people. He's calm, loyal, kind. Lucas watched her carefully. Kind men can still break, he said quietly. The words hit her like a blow. A tremor ran through her hands. She pressed them together to steady herself. Lucas leaned forward slightly. People respond to betrayal in different ways. Some explode outward. Some implode. Some disappear because the pain of staying is greater than the fear of leaving. Olivia's voice cracked. So you think he left because of me? Lucas didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer blame. He simply said, I think we need to find him before he goes too far to come back. She stared at him, hollowed out. Can you find him? I can try, he replied, but the question is when I do, what should I tell him from you? Olivia's breath trembled. The cafe noise faded behind the thrum of her pulse. Tell him? She swallowed hard. That I never meant to destroy him? Lucas closed his notebook softly. That may not be enough, he said, but I'll find him. And in that moment, Olivia realized the terrifying truth. Finding Ethan was one thing, but convincing him to return might already be impossible. The next morning arrived without sunlight. Seattle's clouds pressed low, heavy and unmoving, as if the sky itself refused to let the day progress. Olivia hadn't slept. She sat curled on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the door as though Ethan might walk in at any moment. He didn't. At 8:03 a.m., Lucas Drayton knocked. He entered with the steady, measured presence of someone who understood crises intimately. He carried a tablet, a folder thick with printouts, and that worn notebook of his, its edges frayed, its leather softened by years of other people's secrets. Morning, Lucas said, voice flat but not unkind. We have a lead. Olivia sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. Where? Lucas placed the folder on the coffee table. After the waterfront cafe, Ethan was seen walking south along Alaskan Way. Security footage from a pier shop at 4:52 a.m. confirms it's him. He turned the tablet toward her. The video wasn't perfectly clear, blurred slightly by drizzle on the lens, but it was unmistakably Ethan Hoodup, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He wasn't running. He wasn't frantic. He looked like a man carrying the weight of something he could no longer set down. That direction leads toward bus terminals and interstate routes out of the city, Lucas added. He didn't board a bus, no ticket purchases, no camera matches, but there's another possibility. Olivia gripped the blanket tighter. What possibility? Rideshare. Her heartbeat faltered. We pulled timestamp data from the geolocation pings in that area. A driver picked up someone matching Ethan's description at 5:07 a.m. The ride ended near a rental car facility. The words struck her like a cold wave. He rented a car? He rented one, Lucas confirmed, sliding a printed form across the table. A small silver sedan, paid cash, no credit trail. Cash. Ethan never used cash, not unless he didn't want to be followed. Olivia's throat tightened. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't panic. This was intention. Where did he go? She whispered. We're working on that. Lucas tapped the printed form. The rental lot cameras caught him taking the highway east. That narrows it, Idaho, Montana, or further. I'll keep digging. He paused, studying her. But I need to know more about him. The version of Ethan only you know. She winced, a flicker of shame crossing her face. I don't know if I know him anymore, she murmured. Lucas remained silent, waiting. She took a breath. He loves quiet places, lakes, small towns, places where nobody knows him. He nodded. That helps. She hesitated, then forced the truth out in a fragile, breaking voice. He retreats when he's hurt, not out of anger, out of self-protection. Lucas wrote that down. Then he closed the notebook. I'm going to follow the trail east, yeah, he said. The sooner we move, the better the chance of catching up. Olivia's eyes filled with fear. Lucas, when you find him, what do I do? How do I convince him to come home? Lucas didn't soften his expression. Convincing him is not the problem, he said quietly. The problem is whether he wants to be convinced. That evening, Lucas boarded a flight to Spokane closer to the most likely highway Ethan had taken. Olivia watched him disappear through security, her chest hollow, her thoughts circling like anxious birds. When she returned home, the apartment felt colder than the night before. She walked straight to the bedroom. Ethan's side of the closet was half empty, a few shirts missing, 2 pairs of jeans, his old hiking boots. The sight hit her harder than she expected. He didn't pack out of panic. He packed thoughtfully, deliberately. On the nightstand, she noticed something else subtle, almost hidden. A copy of The Great Gatsby, the one he often taught to his students, its spine worn. She opened it. Between pages 74 and 75, a single handwritten line rested in his familiar script. People go where the hurt finally stops. Her fingers trembled around the paper. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her breath shallow. He didn't just leave, he escaped. And she was the reason. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, a silver sedan cut through a long stretch of highway bordered by snow-dusted pine trees. Ethan drove with both hands on the wheel, expression blank, posture rigid. The radio was off. The silence felt safer. He passed towns without stopping, motels without turning in, rest stops without slowing down. He didn't know his destination. He only knew it had to be away. The memory of Olivia's laughter with Adrian flashed in his mind, too vivid, too fresh. His grip tightened. He blinked hard, forcing the image away, focusing on the road, the hum of tires, the vastness of the landscape ahead. The further he drove, the easier he breathed, but not by much. Lucas landed in Spokane at 10:41 p.m. The airport was small, the crowds thin. He rented a car within minutes and began tracing highway traffic logs, traffic cams, and rural gas station receipts. By dawn, he found what he needed. A record of a cash gas purchase, Time-stamped 3:13 a.m., a silver sedan, heading north. He followed. Miles of open road unfurled before him, gray skies, pine forests, distant mountains. Then, just past a rural Montana exit, Lucas spotted it. Parked near a rundown gas station, dust settling over its hood, was the rental sedan. He pulled over, his pulse steady. He stepped out, scanning the area. A cashier pointed toward the back. Guy who drove that car walked up the hill, said he was looking for temporary work on the ranch across the ridge. Lucas nodded once. A direction, a destination, a path. He followed the ridge trail, boots crunching over frost-bitten grass, and then he saw him. Ethan stood near a wooden fence, speaking quietly to an older ranch hand. His clothes were rumpled, his hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. But he looked calmer, exhausted, wounded, but calmer. Before Lucas approached, he watched the man who had broken under betrayal yet didn't rage, didn't destroy, didn't shout. He simply left. Lucas understood something then. This wasn't a man running away. This was a man trying to survive himself. He stepped forward. "Ethan Mercer?" Ethan turned. Their eyes met. And in that small, quiet moment, the fate of Olivia's hope began to shift slowly, painfully, irrevocably. For a moment, the only sound between them was the low whine of the wind sweeping across the Montana ridge. Ethan stood still, his posture guarded, hands tucked into the pockets of a borrowed jacket. He looked nothing like the man who had once graded essays in a quiet Seattle classroom. Out here, beneath the open sky, he seemed both smaller and somehow more real, worn down, but unmasked. Lucas stopped a few feet away, giving him space. "You're a hard man to find," the detective said. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted past Lucas, toward the snow-dusted mountains in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, roughened by exhaustion rather than hostility. "I didn't want to be found." Lucas nodded once. "I figured." The older ranch hand, sensing something private, tipped his hat and walked away. The quiet closed around them again. Ethan finally looked at Lucas. "You here because of Olivia?" "Yes." A muscle pulsed in Ethan's jaw. Of course it was because of her. "Is she okay, he asked, though the question sounded reluctant. "She's holding on," Lucas said carefully. "She filed a missing person report. She's been calling every few hours. She hasn't slept." Ethan laughed once, a tired, humorless exhale. "That sounds like guilt, not concern." Lucas didn't respond. Ethan lowered his gaze, kicking lightly at the dirt. His voice softened in a way that felt like bruising. "I didn't want her worrying, but I couldn't stay there, not after everything I saw." Lucas studied him quietly. The man in front of him wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger would have been something to work with. This was something deeper, the fatigue of someone who had spent too long carrying a wound that kept reopening. Lucas stepped closer. "She asked me to give you something." Ethan's eyes flickered. "A letter?" "A message." Ethan inhaled slowly, bracing himself. "What did she say?" Lucas pulled out his notebook but didn't open it. Instead, he repeated the words from memory. "She said she never meant to destroy you." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed. He looked away, focusing on the horses grazing in the pasture beyond the fence. For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, it was quiet enough to be carried away by the wind if Lucas hadn't been listening closely. Intent doesn't erase impact. Lucas watched him, letting the silence settle again. Ethan continued, voice tight but steady. "Do you know what hurt the most? Not the affair, not the messages, not even the lies." He swallowed. "It was the realization that she wasn't unhappy with me. She was happier without me. The words cracked open something raw, something unguarded. Lucas felt the weight of them more than the volume. Ethan pressed fingers to his forehead. I kept waiting for her to come home and see me. Not the apartment, not the responsibilities. Me, the person she married. He shook his head. But she stopped seeing me long before she cheated. Lucas exhaled softly. And now? He asked. What do you want, Ethan? A long pause. Ethan lifted his eyes, the grief in them startlingly clear. I want peace. Lucas nodded slowly. Do you want her? Ethan didn't hesitate. No. The cold Montana wind swept between them, carrying away whatever seeds of hope Olivia still held. Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the fence. When I left Seattle, it wasn't to punish her. I wasn't trying to make her worry. He took a slow breath. I couldn't keep being collateral damage in her search for a better version of herself. This time, Lucas understood perfectly. Sometimes people didn't leave because they stopped loving. Sometimes they left because staying meant losing themselves. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small manila envelope. She wrote this. I'm supposed to give it to you if you'd take it. Ethan looked at the envelope as though it might burst into flames. He didn't take it. Instead, he whispered, Does she think an apology will undo what she did? Probably not, Lucas replied. Ethan's breath shook. Then what does she want? Lucas held his gaze. Hope. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was something final in his stare. Tell her I'm finally free. Lucas didn't write it down. He didn't need to. Ethan pushed away from the fence, looking toward the ranch buildings where a modest life, temporary but grounding, waited for him. I'm staying here for a while, he said, working, breathing, trying to feel like a person again. He paused. Please don't tell her more than that. I won't, Lucas said. Ethan nodded, a faint, uneven motion, then walked toward the barn. His shoulders were hunched, but not in defeat, more like someone learning to carry his own weight again. Lucas watched him go. Ethan Mercer was not lost. Not anymore. He had chosen distance. He had chosen silence. He had chosen himself. And the message he entrusted Lucas with was not anger or vengeance. It was closure. When Lucas returned to Seattle 2 days later, he found Olivia waiting in the lobby of his office building. Her eyes were swollen, her posture rigid, but hope flickered in her like a small flame fighting wind. Did you find him? She whispered. Lucas nodded once. Is he coming home? Lucas looked at her for a long, measured moment. No. Her breath caught. She swayed slightly, catching herself on the edge of a chair. What did he say? She asked, voice trembling. Lucas hesitated only because he knew the words would be final, but truth was part of his job. He said, Lucas repeated quietly, Tell her I'm finally free. Olivia's face went still, so still it looked carved from porcelain. Then, slowly, painfully, her expression broke. And for the first time, she understood. She hadn't just lost her husband. She had lost the version of him that still needed her. The words settled into the air between them like dust after a collapse, soft, quiet, but devastating in their finality. Tell her I'm finally free. Olivia didn't cry at first. Shock had a way of numbing even the deepest wounds. She sat motionless in the lobby of the downtown building, fingers curled tightly around the strap of her purse. Lucas stood a few feet away, giving her room, watching her carefully as if she were glass that might shatter at the slightest touch. She wasn't glass. She was something more fragile. When she finally inhaled, it was shallow and unsteady. He said that? Her voice was barely audible. Yes, Lucas replied. Her throat constricted. She turned her face away, blinking rapidly, as though refusing the tears was a way of refusing the truth. But truth didn't soften. It only settled deeper. I thought, she swallowed hard, I thought if he knew how sorry I was, if he knew I wanted him back, he might give me a chance. Lucas didn't move. Olivia, he said carefully, Ethan isn't angry. He's wounded. And sometimes the wounded leave because staying means reopening the same cut again and again. Her hands trembled in her lap. I didn't mean to hurt him. Intention isn't what breaks people, Lucas replied. It's impact. She closed her eyes, letting the words hit her fully. They felt like a verdict. Did he look... She hesitated. Did he look happy? Lucas shook his head. No, but he looked unburdened. Unburdened, the opposite of her. For a long moment, Olivia simply sat there, hollowed out. People walked past businessmen, tourists, couples holding hands. Life continued in every direction. But for her, the axis had shifted, thrown off balance by a sentence that left no space for negotiation. Lucas glanced toward the elevator. I can get you some water. No, Olivia whispered, standing on unsteady legs. I need air. She walked out of the building, the automatic doors parting with a soft hiss. Cold Seattle wind rushed over her, slicing through her coat. She crossed the sidewalk and leaned against a stone railing overlooking the street. Only then did the tears come. Quiet at first, small, trembling releases, then deeper, raw, pulling her down until she pressed her palms against her face to hold herself together. She cried not just for Ethan, but for the version of herself she had allowed to disappear, the ambitious woman, the admired designer, the woman who believed she could keep her world separate. She hadn't realized that while climbing upward in one life, she had stepped off a ledge in another. She cried for the messages, for the lies, for the night Ethan walked out and she didn't run after him. She cried for the realization that came too late. She didn't lose her husband in one moment of betrayal. She lost him slowly, over time, in all the ways she stopped trying to love him. When she finally wiped her eyes, the world fell back into focus. She had things to face. Lucas waited until she returned to his side, her breathing shaky but steadier. If you want more details, he offered, I can tell you. No, she interrupted softly. He's gone. And even if he wasn't, I don't think he wants to hear anything from me. Lucas slipped his hands into his pockets. You should know something else. She stiffened, preparing herself for another blow. He didn't ask where you were, Lucas said. Not once. Not even out of curiosity. The statement didn't strike like lightning. It seeped, quietly, painfully. She exhaled, shoulders falling. He's trying not to look back, she murmured. Lucas nodded. I think he understands that looking back would break him all over again. Her mouth tightened. Will you be going back? She asked. To Montana? Yes, but not to speak to him. No, Lucas said simply. She stared at him for a moment. Why did you really go after him, Lucas? My sister hired you, but you could have walked away after finding the car. Why follow the trail all the way? Lucas's jaw shifted slightly, an almost imperceptible reaction. Because men like Ethan, he said quietly, are the kind who disappear for good if someone doesn't reach them in time. His eyes softened, not sympathetically, but knowingly. And because I've seen how far hurt people run when they think they've failed someone. Olivia absorbed that in silence. She didn't ask what he meant. Something about his voice told her it was a story he didn't care to reopen. He continued, I can keep tabs from a distance. Make sure he's safe. But he doesn't want contact. Not from you. Not from anyone tied to the life he left. She nodded weakly. What should I do? She whispered. Lucas hesitated before replying. Live with the truth, he said, and decide who you're going to be after it. That night, Olivia returned to an apartment that felt unfamiliar. Ethan's absence echoed in every room, in the untouched bookshelf, the quiet kitchen, the half-empty closet. She walked to the dining table. The tablet still sat there. She picked it up, hands trembling. Her reflection stared back, a woman undone by her own choices. She unlocked the device and opened the message thread with Adrian. Then, slowly, painfully, she began deleting each message, one by one, word by word, memory by memory. The final one lingered. Thinking of you tonight. Her thumb hovered. Then she deleted it, but the hollow ache remained. Meanwhile, in Montana, Ethan sat alone on the small porch outside the ranch bunkhouse. The sky above him stretched wide and mercilessly quiet. Stars prickled through the cold air. He held a mug of tea between his palms, warmth seeping into his fingers. But warmth did not reach his chest. He wasn't happy. Not yet. Maybe not soon. But he was free. And for the first time in months, he could breathe without wondering which version of himself he needed to be to keep someone else's love. He didn't know what came next. He just knew it wouldn't include going back. Back in Seattle, Olivia sat curled in the bedroom Ethan once shared with her. She stared at the silent darkness, her heart bruised, her future uncertain. And for the first time since the night he left, she whispered the truth aloud. I've lost him. The room didn't echo it back. It didn't need to. The silence itself carried the truth. The first week after Lucas delivered Ethan's message passed in a blur, blurred hours, blurred emotions, blurred attempts at normalcy that Olivia couldn't quite reach. Seattle kept raining, as if mirroring what she felt, but refused to say aloud. She moved through the days like someone relearning gravity, each step heavier than the last. At the design studio, her colleagues noticed the change. The well-dressed, sharp-tongued, impeccably composed Olivia Hartman had vanished. In her place stood someone quieter, subdued, her eyes shadowed beneath perfectly applied concealer. She arrived late. She left early. She took long pauses in doorways as if forgetting why she had walked there. When Adrian Cole appeared unannounced in the doorway of her office, she froze. "Olivia," he said, with a grin that once felt alluring but now rang hollow. "Haven't seen you in weeks." She closed her laptop calmly, though her pulse tripped. "I've been busy." "Busy avoiding me," Adrian replied, stepping inside with that same self-assured swagger that came so easily to him. "Everything okay?" "No," she said, surprising him, surprising herself. "Nothing is okay." Adrian leaned on the desk. "Is this about Ethan? Look, these things happen. He'll get over—" "Stop." Her voice was steady, colder than she intended. "Whatever this was, it's over." Adrian blinked. "Olivia, come on, don't be dramatic." "This isn't drama," she said. "This is responsibility." She pushed her chair back and stood facing him directly. "I blew up my marriage trying to feel something that wasn't real. I'm done running from myself." Adrian opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "And for the record," she added quietly, "you were never worth what I lost." For the first time since she'd known him, Adrian had no reply. He left the room with a stiff jaw, and Olivia collapsed back into her chair, exhausted but lighter. It wasn't redemption, but it was a first step. While Olivia confronted the wreckage she had created, miles away in Montana, Ethan found himself slipping into a life that was deceptively simple. He worked dawn to dusk, tending to horses, repairing fences, helping move cattle across wide pastures. The ranch was owned by an older couple, Mark and Lynn Holleran, who didn't ask questions and didn't pry into his past. Mark taught him how to hold a rope without blistering his hands. Lynn taught him how to cook stew that could feed a dozen ranch hands. In the quiet, Ethan found rhythm. Not peace, not yet, but rhythm. Some nights he still woke gasping, flashes of messages or memories hitting him like a cold wave. But the space around him was wide enough to breathe through the pain. And for the first time in months, his heart didn't feel trapped inside a shrinking room. One afternoon, while feeding the horses, Lynn approached him with a thermos of coffee. "You're carrying a lot of weight, son," she said gently. He didn't ask how she knew. "You don't need to tell me," she added. "Just know. Losing something you love doesn't make you weak. Staying in pain does." Ethan stared at the ground. He whispered, "It wasn't the betrayal. Not really. It was the feeling that I wasn't enough anymore." Lynn touched his shoulder lightly. "Sometimes people lose sight of the good they have. Doesn't mean you weren't enough. Means they weren't ready to see it." Her words settled over him like a slow, aching balm. Back in Seattle, Olivia found herself reaching a breaking point. One evening, after a day of silence at the studio, she returned home and stood in the doorway of the apartment. The lights were off. The air was still. Ethan's absence pressed against her like a physical force. She walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a photo album, one filled with images from their early years. Road trips, laughing selfies, lazy Sunday mornings, holidays with mismatched sweaters Ethan hated but wore anyway. She touched each photo with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the quiet room. "I'm so sorry." But apologies, like memories, couldn't travel across distance. She closed the album gently. That night, she wrote a letter not to send, but to say everything she never had the courage to speak aloud. "Ethan, I didn't lose you in one moment. I lost you piece by piece. Every time I chose silence over truth, ambition over love, escape over honesty. I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you find a life where you wake up feeling whole again, even if that life has nothing to do with me." She folded the letter and placed it inside the book he left behind, The Great Gatsby. A symbolic ending to a story she'd ruined. Days turned to weeks. Lucas checked in periodically, not about Ethan specifically, but to make sure Olivia hadn't collapsed beneath the weight of her guilt. His updates were sparse. "He's safe. He's working. He's staying." Those were the only words he offered, and they were all she needed. One afternoon, he found her sitting on a bench outside the studio, hair tied back, eyes red, but more focused than before. "I need to ask," she said quietly. "Does he hate me?" Lucas considered the question. "No," he said. "He doesn't hate you, but he doesn't want the life he had with you anymore." She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth with a steadiness she didn't have weeks before. "Then I'll let him go," she whispered, "not because I stopped loving him, but because holding on would destroy us both." Lucas looked at her for a long moment, assessing, evaluating. "You're changing," he said. "I'm trying," she replied. "It's the only thing left to do." Meanwhile, Ethan stood at the top of a ridge overlooking the ranch as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the world in gold and shadow. The cold air filled his lungs. He felt tired. He felt bruised. But he felt alive. He wasn't healed. Healing wasn't a moment, it was a quiet, continuous choosing. But he was choosing calm, choosing space, choosing himself. He closed his eyes, letting the wind brush against his face. There was no bitterness in him now, just distance and a slow, steady acceptance. Olivia's story was no longer his to carry, and the life ahead of him, uncertain, imperfect, but honest, was finally his own.